Hello, everyone. On today's podcast episode, I'm going to talk about something that baffles scientists a lot, and it is chaos. They always say, this world is too chaotic for there to be God. This world, is filled with random chance. And because of it, there should be, how can God exist, or how can God be controlling the world when the world is so chaotic? Well, if you've read if you've listened to my episodes before, that I talk about the concept of duality. That this world is, it's a dual world. It's a world of duality. And what I mean is, a magnet comes with positive and negative sides, right? If you break a magnet into two, you would think there'll be, you'll have a magnet with a positive side and a negative side, right? But you're wrong. If you break a magnet into two, you just have two magnets with both positive and negative sides. And that's how this whole world works in general. You may think that's only related to magnets, but it's actually how the whole world works. The two opposites of a dual of something, right? The two opposites of something always exist simultaneously together. So what I mean is, if you see a ruler, like I said, right? If you see a ruler, it has a left side and a right side, right? If you break a ruler in half, what do you have? You have two rulers with that have one left side and one right side on both sides. So you have two rulers with left sides and right sides. If you break those two rulers in half, you still have each ruler that you have will still have a left side and a right side. Just like a magnet has a positive side and a negative side, if you break a ruler in half, you'll still have a left side and a right side. And if you turn that ruler up, it'll have an upside and a downside, right? If you take a ruler and you place it, vertically in front of you, there'll be an upside and a downside, right? If you break that ruler in half, you'll have two rulers that have upsides and downsides. You'll never have a ruler that's only upsides or only downsides. The up and down will always come together. Left and right will always come together. Positive and negative will always come together, and they're always mixed. They may look separate from afar. Left and right look separate, right? But when you cut it in half, you realize there's still left and right. If you cut any ruler in half, you will still realize, each portion of those rulers still has a left and right side, no matter how much you cut that ruler in half. No matter how many, you don't have to cut it in half. Just cut it any way you want to cut it. You'll always have a left side and a right side to a ruler. Same with small and big. If you take something that's small and something that's big together, right? And you cut them in half, you still have small and big, So no matter what you do, you always have small and big. They come together. So how this works is chaos and order come together. In this chaotic world, there will always be order. Just like in a magnet, a magnet always has a positive and a negative side. Chaos will always have order within it. Order will always have chaos within it. So let me explain it differently. The world looks random, right? When you have children, there's a random chance that your child will be male or female. That's what science says. It's true. But because we think there's randomness, we think that means everything is random. But you're wrong. This world may appear random, right? But this very world that you live in has laws of gravity. The laws of gravity is not random. The law of gravity will always will always be the same. That's order. The laws of thermodynamics, that will always be the same. That's order. The laws of physics will always be the same. That's order. These are examples of order. So although the world looks disorderly and chaotic, every aspect of this world has laws that are orderly. The laws never change. Yet, when we look around the world, it looks like everything changes all the time. But yet, the very foundation of the world never changes. The very rules that govern this world never changes. That's order. When something is perfectly orderly, it looks chaotic from the outside. When something is very chaotic, it looks orderly from the outside. So, you may think, the child you give birth to is chaotic, the truth is there's actually order within it. And God controls the order of chaos. So the randomness of this world, what child you give birth to, God controls it. And do you know how God controls the randomness of this world? If you're someone who knows who's ever played a game before, right? You know that many games have, randomness to them, right? Especially what type of game? Gambling games. Gambling games have a lot of randomness to it, right? If you place, they usually if you go to a casino, or you go to an online casino or any gambling den, you find that the developers of these online games, right, or the developers of these games, they tell you the odds of the game. It's either 1 in 4 or 1 in 2 or 1 in 10 or 1 in 100, right? On the surface, when you play the game will always have, you think the game has an odd of 1 in 10, right? Because the developers tell you the game has an odd of 1 in 10. But the truth is, behind the scene, the odds can be changed at the whim of the developers. So if the game has if the gambling game has a shady developer, right? They'll tell you the game has an odd of 1 in 10, right? But the truth is, behind your back, they've changed the odds to 1 in 100, and that's why you have to be careful if you gamble. If you're a gambler, you have to be careful where you gamble at, because you may think that you see the odds on the computer, or you see the odds on a board somewhere, and you think those are the right odds. You don't know that behind the scenes, the developers can change the randomness at any point in time. They can make it very random or very, very orderly. So they can change the odds from 1 in 100 to 1 in 1,000 to 1 in 1,000,000 to 1 in 1 billion, or they can change the odds to 1 in 1. And this is why you have to be careful. They can change the odds to make you win every single time, or they can change the odds to make it impossible for you to win. And since they're the developers, right? They see the things you don't see. They see the very code of the game. They see it, and they can control that code at any time they want. And that's how this world works as well. God is the developer of this world. It can change the odds of anything from 1 in 10 to 1 in 1,000,000 to 1 in 1 billion. You understand what I'm saying? God can change the odds of the world at his whim, because he's the developers, and because he's the developer of the game of this world. He works with the code that the scientists can't see. Scientists can only see the game from the point of view of a player. The entire world, we as the players of this world can only see the world from our own point of view. We can never see the world from the point of view of the developer, the person behind the scenes, the ones who created the laws of this world. The person who created the laws of this world can change the laws at their whim. But we as the players will never be able to see what goes on behind the scenes. Just like a player of a gambling game, you can never see the odds. They can guess the odds. They may, on Sunday the odds could be 1 in 4, and then when they play, it's 1 in 4. Then on Saturdays, when there are a lot of players playing, right? Saturdays, it's usually the weekend. There's a lot of players playing. The game doesn't, the game developers do not want the players to win a lot. So the game developers do not want the players to win a lot. Guess what? They'll change the odds from 1 in 4 to 1 in 500 or 1 in 1,000,000 to make it impossible to win the game. And yet the players, since they're not they don't have access to the very codes of the world. We humans do not have access to the very code of the world. We only see the world from the point of view of a player. We can never see the world from the point of view of the person that's creating the world itself. We never see what we can't see. We only see what God allows us to see. And the world that God allows us to see is the game world. We can't see what happens behind the scenes. We can't see how the world was created to begin with. We only see what we're capable of seeing. If someone creates a game, right? Every game has a storyline, right? Every game has a storyline. The players inside a game or the NPCs inside a game will only see the game from the point of view of the storyline that the game developers created the game to be. If the game developers created, a storyline, right? Like a Big Bang, the players and the NPCs inside the game will only see the Big Bang. No matter how much they research, everything will only point back to the Big Bang. They will never know that the game itself was created in a whole different manner. They will only see the game from the point of view of what the game developers want them to see. The game developers control what you can see, what you can't see. It can create the game in a way to give you the illusion, that follows a script, that follows a storyline. So when scientists explore the world, the game world, they only see the game from the point of view of that the game developers want them to see it from. You understand? So that's how this world works. You will never be able to see what God doesn't want you to see as a scientist. You will only see what God wants you to see. And what God wants you to see is what was already created for you to see. You will never see how God truly created this world. You will only see how God wants you to think He creates the world. You will only see what the game developers want you to see. You will never see what happens behind the scenes. The players of a game will never be able to see the source code of the game. They will never be able to see the code, the very code of the game. Even if they see a code in the game, it will be a code that the game developers created for them to see. And that's how there's order and chaos. The world is very orderly, and at the same time, it is very chaotic. God controls the chaos of this world, just like a game developer of a gambling game controls the randomness. The odds of a game is controlled. It can be controlled by a game developer. The odds of this world can be controlled by God. So that's how this world works. Within order, there's chaos. Within chaos, there's order. This world looks chaotic, but the truth is, every aspect of this world has laws of physics, laws of gravity, the law of gravity, law of thermodynamics, and there's so many other laws, the biological laws, there's so many intricate laws in science, and each law is order. That's the definition of order. It's law. These are rules that can't be changed. You can't change these rules. They're the very fabric of this world. They make up the very fabric of this world. And that's order. Although the world looks chaotic, it is very orderly. So that's it for today's podcast episode. I'll try to expand on it in the future, but that's it. This is the best I can do for now because I just woke up and I gotta go back to sleep. I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.